Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Welcome back. It's me, Bookwormy, with me, Valerie Monroe, and we have been reading Journey to Nagwanis together. It's a really good book. Thanks, Bookwormy. And tonight we're going to keep going. Tell them what happened last time. If you were here last time, you'll remember that Brogden had gotten sprayed by a skunk. Pew! And he was just about to be relocated, although we don't really know what relocated means. Let's find out. They told him that he was going to be relocated because he'd seen too much. Seen too much, Brogden thought. He tried to recall seeing anything that would justify the treatment he'd received so far, but he could not. And try as he might, he could not even open his eyes to see anything now. While he waited in agony, he decided to rely on his other senses. Oh, the smell of the skunk was all over him, and that was bad enough. It would be a miracle if the stink ever came off. Then he hollered blindly, "You're not taking me anywhere." "Yes, that's correct," nodded the skunk. "I'm staying right here. Well, actually, I will be heading home shortly, changing of the guard in 10 minutes. However, you are definitely leaving. And what do you know," he said with a brief pause, "here they are to take you now." A furious fluttering and flapping of wings filled the air above Brogden's head. In the next second, he felt an angry pecking at his ankles. Prook, prook, prook. Brogden could not see who was doing this. He could only feel thick, pointy beaks poking, prodding, and pecking as they bound his feet with some sort of a rope. He squirmed and wriggled to escape, but it did no good. One of the birds sat on his chest to hold him in place, while another pecked at his hands and tied his wrists together. He continued to twist and turn, but to no avail. When he opened his mouth to scream for help, a large feather was stuffed in it. He gagged violently until he finally spat it out. His captors lifted him up by his arms and feet. They beat their wings faster and harder as they took off, with Brogden slung between them. A horrible shrieking scream erupted and trailed behind them as they left the shoreline. Brogden had never heard such a sound. It sounded like a woman in excruciating pain. The screaming continued to ring in his ears long after he was away from it. Every hair on his head bristled, and goosebumps rose up on his arms and legs. The screaming frightened him more than the birds did. He could tell they were flying over Lake Wahakmo. He heard the waves splashing beneath him and prayed he wouldn't be dropped. He would surely drown in his bound state. He also believed they were close to the lake's surface because a few drops of water plopped onto his forehead. When more drops began landing elsewhere on his body, he realized it was actually a sun shower. The rain picked up and droplets the size of acorns pelted him. But the birds showed no sign of slowing their pace. He was glad at least that he was facing upward because the water acted as kind of an eye wash. Even though the sting from the skunk's spray was still biting, he forced his eyes open to allow the water to swirl around inside his lids and over his eyeballs, and then tears began to drip and the burning gradually subsided. When the cloudiness in his vision cleared entirely, Brogden could see that his captors were two massive black ravens. Their dark eyes stared directly ahead as they flew, just as he had guessed, over Lake Wahakmo. "Hey," he called to the raven who held his wrists, "you really don't have to go through all this trouble. You could just drop me off at Sunset Island. I have friends who live there. They can help me get home." He made a point of not mentioning Maggie, the lock baby. If you look over my shoulder, you see that statue? There she is. There's Maggie. The fewer folks who knew about her, the better. The raven did not respond, so Brogden tried the bird who was holding his feet. "I can give you directions if you need them. Sunset Island is up to the north. You cannot miss it. There's only one house on it." Again, no response. And he realized the ravens were not heading north either. Judging by the position of the sun, they were in fact traveling to the eastern part of the lake. The rain had let up and a faint rainbow was forming overhead. Brogden rationalized that if he had to be the prisoner of massive, unapproachable ravens who were taking him to his tragic death, At least a rainbow would be a very pleasant final image. He took a deep breath and did what Aunt Hazel would have suggested, which was to try to find each color in the rainbow. Always remember Roy G. Biv, she had said. He was trying to figure out the difference between blue and violet when the air erupted with cries from beneath him. Talk, 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 talk! Brogden turned his head and saw a small island directly below. 4 more ravens were perched in trees down there, presumably calling to the 2 birds who held him. And suddenly his captors took a nosedive at a perilous angle. They're coming down like this. Were they going to land somewhere? Brogden wondered with alarm. Where would that be? As far as he could tell, there were no beaches, trails, or even large patches of grass. He could only see trees and tall reeds, and the birds were picking up speed. Talk, 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 talk. As they continued their descent, he closed his eyes and silently counted down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. When he reached 3, he felt a bump that shook his whole body. The ravens had deposited him. Oh, do you hear that? Wonder if that's the cawing of a raven right now. The ravens had deposited him. Every time I say the word raven, it caws. The ravens had deposited him on a patch of brown thatchy ground. Then they began loosening the ropes that restrained him. Once he was free, they flew off to join the other ravens in the treetops, leaving him on the ground without so much as an explanation. Well, isn't this fine? Brogden said angrily, glancing around. He had no idea where he was. Apart from the 6 ravens in the trees, there were no animals or people in sight. The island was perhaps 30 feet wide at most, and as he had guessed from above, mostly a swamp of tall reeds and rushes with the trees rising from it. The birds paid him no mind, so he got up and began pushing his way through the reeds, searching for anything he could use to escape this place. A sign was nailed to one of the trees where the ravens perched. It read, 6 Raven Island. I guess that makes sense. No big surprise there, he thought. He walked across the small island through the swampy areas. When he reached the other side, he discovered a short path. It was at the end of this path that he made a most remarkable discovery. A small wooden door set into the side of a rounded hill. Brogden looked around to see if anyone was watching him. And then he did the only thing he could think of. He knocked. And then he waited. And then he knocked again. A little louder. To his great surprise, someone answered. When Brogden saw who it was, all he could do was blink in utter disbelief. It took another few moments for him to find his voice again. Finley? I can't believe it! He found Finley! I don't know why Finley is in this little house or behind the door on 6 Raven Island, and can you believe he found him? I can't believe it! The only way to find out why he's there and what's going on is to come back tomorrow and read more of Journey to Nagwanis. We can't wait to see it till tomorrow! Bye!